I was standing at the kitchen window washing my hands when my father announced he was giving my apartment away. Not my parents' apartment. Mine. The one I bought at 31 after 7 years of saving. The one with the corner balcony and the view of the park that I had painted myself on a Saturday in November, alone, with a roller and a playlist and a feeling so clean I still think about it sometimes. My name is Lauren. I am 34 years old. And this is the story of the Christmas my family decided my home was theirs to give, and what I did about it before the new year. I need to take you back 3 weeks so you understand what that moment cost them. My family has a house in the suburbs, the same ranch house my parents bought in 1989, the same cream-colored carpet, the same kitchen with the window above the sink where my mother always stood. I drove out every Christmas Eve with wine and a pie and an envelope in my coat pocket. The envelope was for my father's prescriptions, the ones his insurance didn't cover, the ones he never mentioned directly but that I had been quietly paying since I was 28. 6 years of envelopes. He never said thank you out loud. He squeezed my shoulder when he opened them and that was our language. I did not mind. Or I told myself I didn't. My sister Dana is 3 years older than me. She married Kevin 9 years ago, a man I have tried to like and mostly managed. They have 2 boys, 7 and 9, loud and sweet and full of the particular energy of children who have never been told to be quiet. Kevin had been out of work since spring. His landscaping company had not survived the summer. Dana worked at the school district front office, which paid enough for groceries and not much else. They lived in a rental on the east side of town that was too small and too expensive and they talked about moving every year and never did. I knew all of this. I wrote the checks that helped them through the summer. I did not keep count because keeping count felt mean. I am telling you now because the count matters. My apartment is on the 11th floor of a building downtown. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a kitchen with white counters I chose myself, and that corner balcony that catches the evening light in a way that made me gasp the first time I saw it. I bought it with a down payment I had been building since I was 25. Dollar by dollar out of a salary that was never large and a life that was deliberately small. I drove an old car. I did not take vacations. I ate lunch at my desk and dinner at home and I watched that account grow the way you watch something that is entirely yours to tend. When I signed the closing papers, I sat in the parking lot of the title company for 10 minutes before I could drive. Not crying. Just holding the folder in my lap and understanding that I had done the thing I set out to do. I am an only daughter who learned early that things go to the people who wait for them. I stopped waiting and started building instead. My family came to the housewarming. My mother exclaimed over the balcony. My father said it was a good investment. Kevin measured the 2nd bedroom with his eyes in a way I noticed but did not name. Dana said it must be so quiet living alone. She said it like quiet was a symptom. That was 2 years ago. On Christmas Eve, I drove out with the wine and the pie and the envelope. The driveway was full. Dana's minivan, my parents' car, a sedan I didn't recognize. And at the curb across the street, a white cargo van, the kind with the rental stickers on the back panel. I noticed it the way you notice a thing that is slightly off, the way a room feels different when a piece of furniture has been moved. But it was the holidays. Neighbors had guests. I parked and carried the pie to the door and told myself I was reading into things. My mother met me at the door with both arms. She smelled like the vanilla candles she had been buying since I was a child. She kissed my cheek and said the words that I have turned over many times since. She said, "Your father has something to tell everyone at dinner." Then she smiled the way she smiles when she already knows the punchline. Dinner was loud and warm in the way that big family dinners are when everyone is on their best behavior because the good china is out. My Aunt Patricia. My cousins James and Bev. Dana and Kevin and the boys, who had been given their devices and were blissfully quiet for once. My father at the head, carving the roast with the electric knife he only uses on holidays, looking like a man who has been sitting on a piece of good news all week. Kevin leaned toward me halfway through the first course. Friendly, casual, the way he always is when he wants something. He asked if I had ever thought about renting out the second bedroom, hypothetically speaking. I said I used it as an office and had no plans. He nodded. He cut his meat. He did not ask anything else. But I watched him catch Dana's eye across the table. And she looked down at her plate with a small smile. The roast was finished. My mother brought out the pie I had made. My father pushed back from the table and picked up his glass the way he does when he has decided something is about to happen. The boys looked up from their screens. My aunt folded her napkin. My father said he had an announcement. He said the family had been through a hard year. He said Kevin's situation was difficult and the boys deserved stability. He said he and my mother had been talking about what they could do. And then he said it. He said they were giving Dana and Kevin my apartment. A Christmas gift. A real home for the boys. They could be settled by the second week of January. He said it the way people announce things that are already done. Not a question. Not a proposal. A fact, delivered from the head of the table with a glass raised in one hand and the confidence of a man who has never once considered that the person he is describing might have a different version of the story. Everyone turned to look at me. There was a half-second of pure silence where the table held its breath. Dana was already crying. The happy kind, the kind she saves for moments when she gets what she wanted. Kevin had his arm around her and his eyes on me, and in his expression was something I recognized after a moment. It was the look of a man who has already measured the rooms. My father lifted his glass toward me. He said, "I knew you'd understand, sweetheart." I looked at him. I looked at my mother, who was beaming. I looked at my sister's tears. And I did the thing none of them were expecting. I smiled. I raised my own glass. I said, "What a wonderful Christmas gift." My aunt started to applaud. The boys cheered without knowing why. Kevin exhaled. My father sat back in his chair like a man who has successfully navigated a difficult operation. I ate dessert. I helped with the dishes. I said goodnight to everyone with the same voice I always use, warm and steady, the voice of the reliable daughter. I drove home with both hands on the wheel and my mind completely, entirely calm. Because I had understood something at that table. They had not asked me. They had not asked because asking would have meant acknowledging that the apartment was mine. They had skipped the question on purpose. And if I had erupted, if I had said what was true loudly in that dining room, I would have become the villain. The cold single woman who put property over her own nephews. They had built the situation so that any honest reaction would confirm their story about me. So I did not react. I started making a list instead. I am a project manager. When things stop making sense, I make a timeline. I drove home and I opened my laptop and I searched for a name I had not thought about in 4 months. Marcus Webb. He was a property investor who had approached me in September, walked the building, slid a card under my door with a handwritten note asking if I would ever consider selling. I had written him a polite email that said I was not interested. He had written back that the offer stood if my situation changed and left his direct number. I found his email at 11:15 on Christmas Eve. Before I wrote to Marcus, I made myself do one thing. I called my sister the next morning, Christmas Day. Not to fight. To give them a door to walk through. I told Dana, as clearly and quietly as I could, that Mom and Dad did not own my apartment. I told her my name was the only name on the deed. I told her I had bought it myself and I had not agreed to give it away and I would appreciate it if she and Kevin would not make plans around it until we had talked. Dana was quiet for a moment. Then she said that Dad had already worked everything out. She said she understood it was a lot to process but she hoped I would come around because the boys really needed this. She said it the way my mother had said it at the door on Christmas Eve. Like my objection was a weather pattern that would pass. I thanked her for understanding and got off the phone. Then I emailed Marcus Webb. He replied within 2 hours. Cash offer, clean close, same number he had offered in September with a small adjustment upward for the market. He asked when I could talk. I called him that afternoon, Christmas Day, while my family was presumably eating leftovers and choosing paint colors for rooms they did not own. Marcus Webb was businesslike and kind. He asked 2 questions: was the title clear and was I certain? I said yes to both. He said he could open escrow the next morning and close by the 31st if his team moved fast. He had done it in 5 days before, he said, on a unit with a clean title. He liked clean titles. I told him the title was the cleanest thing in my life. We shook hands over the phone. That evening, Kevin showed up at my door. I want to tell you I was surprised. I was not. Kevin is the kind of man who moves before he has permission, which is probably what made him good at landscaping before it made him broke. He was standing in my hallway in his work jacket with a tablet in his hand, the screen showing the floor plan of my apartment pulled from the building's listing page. He wanted to measure the 2nd bedroom for the boys' bunk beds. I told him the 2nd bedroom was not available. He told me my father had already arranged everything. He told me, friendlier than the situation deserved, that I was making this harder than it needed to be. He said he knew this was a lot to ask, but the boys had already picked their rooms, that he had payments coming due in February, and this apartment was the only thing standing between his family and a serious problem. I understood all of that. I want to be clear that I am not a person without sympathy. Kevin's business failed. That is real and it is hard and it is not entirely his fault. But then he said the word that closed the last door in me. He said the family had decided and I was outvoted. Outvoted. On my own home. I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about telling him right then what I had spent the afternoon arranging. The words were in my mouth. But a loud win is a small win, and I wanted the kind that stays. I told him to take his tablet home. I told him there was nothing to measure. I closed the door. Through it I heard him say that I would regret this. I leaned my back against my own door and I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because he was so completely wrong about which one of us was going to regret something. The title search took 24 hours. The escrow officer called me the morning of the 28th with a voice that was professionally pleasant and a question I had been waiting for: had I fully considered the timeline? I told her I had considered nothing else for 3 days. She said the closing could be the 31st at 9 in the morning. Cash wire same day. She said I should bring the deed and my ID. I told her I would be there. The hardest part of those 4 days was not the paperwork. The paperwork was the easy part. Numbers and signatures and a process that moved exactly as fast as the documents required and no faster. The hardest part was the silence. My family thought I was coming around. Dana texted twice asking about a moving date. My mother left a voicemail saying she knew I would do the right thing because I always did. My father did not call at all because my father operates on the assumption that the world corrects itself back to his preferences without him having to ask twice. Not one of them said, "How are you doing with this?" Not one of them said, "We know this is a lot." They were planning a New Year's party at my parents' house. I found out from my cousin Bev, who texted me a photo of the invitation my mother had sent out. "Bring something to drink," the invitation said. "We have big news to share about the family." There was a little house emoji next to the words "big news." My father had sent invitations. He had invited people to come watch him give away my home. I decided then that I would go. Not for revenge. Or not only for revenge, because I will not insult you by pretending I felt nothing when I read that invitation. Mostly I decided to go because my father had chosen an audience for his version of this story. I thought my version deserved the same room. I went to the closing on the morning of the 31st. The escrow office was on the 2nd floor of a building near the county courthouse, and it smelled like carpet cleaner and recycled air. Marcus was already there when I arrived, a compact man in a gray coat who stood up when I walked in and shook my hand with both of his, which I found unexpectedly kind. The escrow officer had everything ready. Title clear, no liens, no surprises, one name on the deed. My name. Just like the day I signed it. The signing took 35 minutes. I remember thinking about that. 7 years to save the money. 2 years to own it. 35 minutes to let it go. When it was finished, Marcus shook my hand again and said he hoped my next chapter was everything this one should have been. I thought that was a generous thing to say to a stranger. The escrow officer handed me a copy of the closing documents in a manila envelope and told me the wire would hit my account by 3 that afternoon. I thanked her. I walked to my car. I sat in the parking lot for a moment, not crying, just letting the morning air be what it was. Then I drove to my apartment one last time. I had a key until midnight. The building manager had been kind about it, given the circumstances. I let myself in through the lobby, rode the elevator to the 11th floor, unlocked my door for the last time. The apartment was already half packed because I had spent 2 days boxing what mattered. The balcony was still there. The morning light came through the corner windows the way it always had, warm and indifferent, landing on the white counters I had chosen. I walked through each room slowly. I stood on the balcony for a few minutes and looked at the park below, at the bare winter trees and the dog walkers and the ordinary morning happening without any awareness that this particular witness was leaving. I said goodbye to the rooms the way you say goodbye to things that were good to you. Then I locked the door and put the key in an envelope in my purse. And I drove to my parents' house. The New Year's party was everything I expected. My parents had put out the good napkins and the sparkling cider and a banner across the mantel that said Happy New Year in silver letters. There were 14 people in that living room when I arrived. My cousins, my Aunt Patricia, 2 neighbors from down the street, the couple from my parents' church. My father had done his work. He had built an audience. Dana and Kevin sat near the front of the room like guests of honor, which I suppose they believed they were. The boys were chasing each other around the furniture until someone made them stop. Kevin had a look of settled satisfaction that I recognized as the look of a man who believes the hard part is behind him. I set my coat on the chair by the door. I had a folder in my bag. I said hello to my cousins and accepted the cider my mother pressed into my hands. I found a seat near the back where I could see the whole room. I said almost nothing for the first hour. I watched my father work the room. He had that lightness he gets when he is proud of something, moving from conversation to conversation, laying the ground for what was coming. He touched my shoulder once as he passed me and said, "Glad you're here, sweetheart." He meant it. He genuinely believed this was going to be a good night for all of us. When the hour turned, my father tapped his glass. The room quieted the way rooms do when they have been prepared to quiet. My father talked about the year. He talked about difficulty and family and the importance of sticking together. He talked about his grandchildren and the stability they deserved. He built toward it the way he always builds toward things, slowly, with feeling, in no apparent hurry. And then he reached into his shirt pocket and produced a key on a red ribbon. He said that as of the new year, Dana and Kevin's family would have a real home. He said it was his gift to his grandchildren. He said he was proud to have a family that takes care of its own. He looked at me when he finished. Not a question. A period. The room applauded. Dana was crying the easy way again. Kevin reached for the key. My Aunt Patricia was nodding. The neighbors, who knew none of the story, applauded because everyone else was. My father raised his glass toward me. I set down my cider. I stood up. And I waited. That was the whole plan. I just waited until the applause ran out of itself and the room turned curious because I was standing and not clapping. It took about 10 seconds. 10 seconds is a long time when 14 people are watching you. When it was quiet, I said, "There's something everyone here should know before we celebrate." I opened the folder. I put 2 pieces of paper on the coffee table where everyone could see them. The deed with my name highlighted. The closing statement dated December 31st, that morning, with the sale amount and the signatures and the stamp. I said, "My parents can't give away something that isn't theirs. This apartment was mine. My name, nobody else's. And as of 9 this morning, it isn't mine anymore either. I sold it." The room did not understand at first. There was a silence that was almost physical, the kind where people look at each other to check if they heard correctly. My father picked up the closing statement. I watched his eyes move down to the date. To the sale amount. To the word sold stamped in the bottom corner in red ink. His face changed the way weather changes. Slowly, then all at once. Dana stopped crying. Kevin set the ribbon key down on the table with a small sound that was somehow the most definitive sound in the room. My mother put both hands over her mouth. Then Trent stood up. He was not loud at first. Loud came second. First there was a moment of pure disbelief, his face going through the stages faster than my father's had. Then he knocked his chair back and his voice filled the room and he said I had destroyed his family, that I had done this out of spite, that his boys had already chosen their rooms and the truck was booked for the first and I had no idea what I had taken from them. Dana was behind him, crying the real way now, the kind that has no vanity in it, saying how could I do this, how could I be this cold, this selfish, what was wrong with me? I stood there with my hands folded. That was all I did. I stood and I let them shout and I did not give them anything to push against because I had learned at that Christmas Eve table that a reaction was what they needed to make me the villain. Without a reaction, the documents on the table were the only story in the room. My father found his voice and said I had no right. He said this was a family matter. He said how dare I? And I waited for him to run out of air. When he did, I said something very quiet. Quiet enough that the room had to settle down to hear it. I said, you told everyone I didn't need all that space. That it was just me. I paused. I said, you were right. Now none of us have it. Kevin's mouth closed. Dana's face just hung there, wet and stunned. My father sat down heavily, the way tall men sit when their legs have made a decision without them. My Aunt Patricia, who I have loved my whole life for her absolute inability to perform a feeling she does not have, put her hand over her heart. She was crying but she was nodding and the nodding was the thing that I will remember. My mother did not shout. She never shouts. She looked at me with her hand still over her mouth and said in a very small voice, but honey, you always seemed so fine. And there it was. Not malice. Not cruelty. Just a mother who had looked at her steady, capable daughter and decided fine meant available. Who had decided so long ago and so completely that she stopped checking. Who had built a whole architecture of assumption on the foundation of my silence and called it generosity. I looked at her for a moment before I answered. I wanted to be careful because I loved her and that love was real and I did not want to use it as a weapon. I said, that was the problem, Mom. You decided I was fine. So my life became something you could spend. She started to cry and I let her. Some things only change if you let them be felt. If I had crossed the room and held her the way I had always held her through every hard thing, I would have spent the rest of my life being the person who holds everyone through everything and holds nothing for herself. I let her feel it. Then I picked up the folder with the deed and the closing statement, because those documents were mine and I intended to keep them. I reached into my coat pocket and took out my parents' house key, the spare I had carried for 6 years so I could check on them, let myself in when the furnace made a noise or the tax forms looked complicated or they just needed someone reliable to appear. I set it on the table next to Kevin's ribbon key. I said, I think you can all manage from here. I said goodnight to my aunt. I thanked my mother for the cider. And I walked out. My cousin Bev caught up with me at the door. She gripped my arm and said nothing for a second, just held on. Then she said, I didn't know. I should have asked. I told her it wasn't hers to fix. She walked me to my car and stood in the cold while I got in, which was the kindest thing anyone did for me that night. I drove back to my apartment. Or to the place that had been my apartment until that morning. I sat in the parking lot under the balcony I had given up and I looked at it for a while. The light was off. The curtains I had hung were still in the windows. Marcus would repaint, eventually. He would put in different counters or different fixtures and the apartment would become a different apartment and mine would be the version that only I remembered. I was okay with that. I had not loved it less for letting it go on my own terms. There is a difference between losing something and releasing it. I knew which one this was. My phone started filling up around 9 that evening. By midnight there were 61 messages. Kevin's went from outrage to bargaining and back. Dana's were long and tearful, and in every one of them her family's need was the subject of every sentence, and I appeared only as the person failing to meet it. My father sent 2 short texts that said we needed to talk, which is how my father phrases things when he means I need to explain myself to him. My mother's messages were the only ones I read twice. In the last one, she did not say anything about the apartment. She just said she missed me and she was sorry and she hoped I would let her call. I did not respond that night. Not to any of them. The only message I answered was from my Aunt Patricia, who had texted at 10:15 a single sentence. I have been thinking about this wrong for years and I am glad you made me see it differently tonight. I wrote back, that's all I wanted. I left on the 2nd of January. My car was packed with what mattered, which turned out to be less than I expected and more than fit comfortably, but I managed. The building manager gave me a proper goodbye, which was kind of him. The lobby looked the same as it always had. Some places are loyal that way. I drove north. The new city is 3 hours away and I have been here for 4 months now and I am still learning it, the way you learn a place that has not yet organized itself around your habits. My apartment here is a rental, smaller than what I had, with a window in the kitchen that catches the afternoon light. I have not painted the walls yet. I am deciding on the color, which is the kind of decision I am allowing myself to take time with. My mother and I have spoken twice. Short calls, both of us careful. She is trying. I believe that. What she tried to do and what she is trying now are both true and I am holding both of them without resolving them into something simpler than they are. My father has not called. I did not expect him to and I do not know yet what I think about that. Dana sent me a birthday card in March. It had a sunflower on it. Inside she wrote that she hoped I was well and that she thought about me. She did not mention the apartment or Christmas or any of it. I read it 3 times and put it on my windowsill where I can see it from the kitchen table. I have not written back yet. I am working up to it. Kevin and his family are still in the East Side rental. The landscaping business he has started again, smaller this time, is apparently doing better. My cousin Bev told me this, who is now someone I call on Sunday evenings, which is a friendship I did not expect and am grateful for. The sale money from the apartment is in an account I opened the day the wire cleared. I have not spent it on anything yet. I look at the balance sometimes, not to count it but to confirm that it is there. That it is mine in the clean and final way that things are yours when you have chosen them. My grandfather used to say that you find out what you actually own when someone tries to take it from you. He was right, though not in the way I think he meant. The apartment was on the deed. But what I actually owned was the decision of what to do with it. Nobody voted on that. Nobody could. I want to leave you with this, because if you have listened all the way here then you are probably someone who knows what it is to be the one people count on without counting. Someone who has kept the peace so long that peace became the cost of your presence in every room. You are allowed to draw a line. Not with drama. Not with a speech. Just a line, drawn in the quiet, held in the clean voice you use when you are finally saying something true. The line I drew cost me something. I want to be honest about that. I am not going to tell you that I drove away from that building and felt nothing but relief. I felt the loss of the apartment and the loss of the version of my family I had been protecting and the loss of the idea that if I was steady enough and generous enough and present enough, things would eventually balance out the way I needed them to. They don't balance out. You have to balance them yourself. But on the other side of that loss was something I had never quite had before. A life that was entirely mine to decide. A city where no one had a claim on my calendar or my savings account or my second bedroom. A silence that was not the silence of holding things in but the silence of not owing anyone an explanation. I took a walk last Sunday morning, early, before the city got loud. There is a park 3 blocks from my building and the trees are starting to come in, that particular green that only happens in April, and I walked through it with my coffee and I did not think about anything that needed solving. That was new. That was mine. I had earned the right to it the same way I had earned everything else, quietly, by myself, one difficult choice at a time. Your name is on your life. Make sure you're the only one who can sign it.